Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. The dreams and desires of a 13-year-old farm boy, 6 engineers, a popular singer, and a chemist will converge over 30 years to launch an industry none imagined. On an Idaho farm, a boy named Philo T. Farnsworth has an inspiration while plowing his mother's field.
Whoa! Mr. Tolman is here to see you. Go on up. Come on.
Mr. Tolman! Mr. Tolman!
Well, hi there, Philo.
He works on his notions of how to turn images into electrical signals for 2 years. In 1922, Philo, a 9th grade student, shows his work to his chemistry teacher. His idea? Scan pictures one line at a time. Electrons will move back and forth across the front of a vacuum tube, like a plow crisscrossing a field. It's the foundation for what we call television.
Stops, goes back, and then it keeps on doing that.
But business doesn't wait for dreams. People use the tools at hand. Years earlier, innovative companies started experimenting with a new art form, motion pictures. Then, as now, the goal was to inform customers and employees. Styles have changed, but not the message. Businesses used motion pictures to promote, instruct, publicize, and inform, before D.W. Griffith and Walt Disney learned how to entertain audiences. The first sound motion picture was a public relations film. Audiences heard Western Electric's executives speak and toured the Hawthorne plant in 1924.
A type of sound reproduction, which one might term a perfect illusion.
3 years later, Al Jolson sang in The Jazz Singer. In 1929, Western Electric made this to explain how movies talked. And Western Electric recorded all the speeches and highlights of the National Electric Light Association's conference. This feat required sleight of hand, not advanced technology. As business and industry discover new uses for film, Farnsworth demonstrates television to the public and battles RCA for his invention. Zworykin's patent claims are dismissed in case after case, but RCA keeps television off the market and protects its profits from radio. In 1939, RCA demonstrates television at the World's Fair and loses its battle with Philo T. Farnsworth. As World War II starts, a device called the magnetophone replaces 78 RPM discs at German radio stations. The music Radio Stuttgart plays all night sounds live, even to Jack Mullen, a U.S. electronics expert stationed in England. He can't imagine how it's possible until he wanders into a station in 1945 and discovers a recorder that uses plastic tape. Mullen packs up 2 magnetophones for the Army and sends 2 home for himself. Back in San Francisco, Mullen assembles his magnetophones and starts demonstrating them for professionals. In 1946, the news reaches one of radio's most popular performers. Bing Crosby detests the schedule that live broadcasting forces him to keep. He joins the fledgling ABC radio network because NBC won't let him air disc recordings of his show. Crosby's producer, Murdo Mackenzie, hears about the magnetophone and invites Mullen to record the first show of Crosby's 1947-48 season. When Crosby hears the recording, he hires Mullen on the spot. From then on, Bing does his show whenever he wants to. Mullen never tells Crosby he only has 50 rolls of tape and no way of getting any more. So Mullen saves every scrap, splices it together, and manages to record 26 shows. In 1948, Crosby Enterprises becomes the distributor for Ampex's Model 200 recorder, a copy of Mullen's magnetophone. 3M introduces a red oxide tape for audio recording. And Crosby Enterprises begins looking for ways Bing can escape the inconvenience of performing live in a new medium, television. Ampex will heed the call.
Was the quality of our products. The fundamental decision was to make our products of excellent quality. 2 letters, EX, for excellence, were added to my initials to form the name of the company.
On April 13th, 1956, there was a call from Mr. Ponyatov, president of Ampex, saying to Bill Wetzel that they hadn't found any tape that they could buy which would work on their video recorder. We need videotape by tomorrow for a demonstration in Chicago.
We were a pretty good bunch of engineers individually, and as a team, I think we achieved something that was fairly remarkable.
A couple of weeks earlier, I had been working on how do you make tape that would resist high temperatures in adverse environments. And it turned out to be the thing I decided on was to have a chemical reaction at the time of coating, and by about 4 in the morning, we had something ready to go. Bill Wetzel delivered the tape to Charlie Ginsberg and his people.
Of course, it was developed in secret. Very few people had seen it. And we demonstrated it to the CBS affiliates.
What they did is they put the tape on, and Charlie ran it across, and his exact words were, well, holy smokes, it really works. He backed it up several seconds, maybe 20, 30 seconds, and all of a sudden, the monitor had what this man had been saying previously, and it stunned the audience. And it was silent for a while, and then there was clapping, stamping feet, pounding, everything. And it turned out to be that the network people present were rushing up to Charlie Ginsberg to bring orders.
We had no idea what we should charge for it. And after we demonstrated it that night, we all sat up in a room and tried to figure out what we should sell it for. How much would it cost us to build it? And we came up with a number, if I remember correctly, of $45,000. And I believe we got orders for about 40 of those at that time. Miserable though they were.
Technical Achievement Emmys are rarely awarded to individuals. Philo T. Farnsworth, Arthur C. Clarke, and Mel Sater are among the few exceptions.
Receiving the Emmy was a big surprise to me because it came about after leaving 3M on early retirement. It was a great honor, and as my mentor, Harold Eady, said at the time, that it's the first one ever given for chemistry. So you can sneak into the theatrical world through chemistry.
There may be some instances, for example, color television, where we're ahead of you. You see, you never concede anything. Wait till you see the picture.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing.
Our first equipment was a 1-inch portable tape recorder that weighed 129 pounds. My camera was a teardrop-shaped camera with a 3-lens turret. When I would go to the wide-angle lens, I'd catch a piece of the sunshade of one of the other lenses, and I always have a little black half-moon in the corner of the picture.
We were never out of studio for the first 4 or 5 years of everything we produced. We built a big enough studio with a loading dock that we could bring IBM mainframe machines into the studio to do training on them, because we couldn't go to the field and shoot them.
We often had to shoot the tape and send the tape with the recorder that it was taped on to be sure that it would play back, because the compatibility from one machine to the other, or from one deck to the other, was very doubtful.
We didn't really know what we were doing or how to make it happen in terms of putting a finished video piece together. But I think that the thing that we all had in common, regardless of how we were using video, was that we believed and we knew that it could communicate.
The thing to do with television, I think, is to make it as simple as possible. That doesn't mean make the idea as simple as possible, but make the presentation as simple as possible, and don't clutter it up with a lot of pictures that divert from what you're trying to say.
So I think every worker, every person that uses television, directly or indirectly, has got to be very careful to be truthful and honest in its use. Because in that way, you see, your own message, the idea, the thought, the hope that you want to get across, comes across clean and pure because it is honest.
In my opinion, a television department will be extremely successful in a corporation if, one, it fits, okay, obviously if the application is there, and two, if you must make your operation as little trouble as possible for a manager to utilize.
And you had to cut the tape in the middle of a control track pulse. So you look through this microscope, lined it up with little wheels, and dropped the guillotine down and cut the tape. And then did the same thing, made your edit, and taped it back together and hoped the thing would lock up and not jump all over when that edit went through the machine.
When I came back from University of Michigan as a hotshot young director, I only had 2 job opportunities. One as an usher at NBC and the other as a production assistant at Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch paid more. That's how I got into corporate television.
We used to do a lot of studio production in the early days. We'd build elaborate sets, if we had the dollars, of course, and we used a lot of talking heads.
Within a few short months, Marketdyne will have the largest single videotape network in the world.
Here at Phillips Petroleum Company, we have tried to take the video media and use it as a problem-solving, cost-effective training and communications tool.
A little far-fetched? Perhaps, but definitely not impossible.
Hello, my name is Doug Merriam, and I'm the head of the video production team for Audit Services Bureau.
Hello, I'm Pat Tanner, one of the Title 20 training managers for the Georgia Department of Human Resources.
Hello, I'm Bob Heitman, speaking for Sony Corporation.
Do you ever get the idea that someone was telling you less than the whole truth?
We started off by purchasing what you see here, a television and a VCR.
Hydrocarbon expulsion from compaction stage 2 shales. But the bumblebee doesn't know this, so he goes ahead.
We were trying to do a nicely packaged, finished video program with stone hammers and chisels, and that's what we were trying to work with. That's where our struggle was really how to make something that looks decent with very primitive tools.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The only really sign I had in the early 70s that what we were doing was going to have some kind of an impact was the feedback and the response and the inquiries we were getting from people who were doing corporate communication jobs in other companies. We started doing the TV news program in the early 70s and got some coverage in TV Guide and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And all of a sudden, we were getting a lot of inquiries from corporate communication people all over the country saying, what is this video news program you're doing? Can we see some examples of it? Can you tell us about it? I'm standing in SKNF's corporate TV studio on the 8th floor. Tomorrow we're going to have an open house here between 11:30 and 1:45 and 3:45 and 4:30. we'd like to invite you up to get a behind-the-scenes look at the SKNF TV News so that you can become more familiar with the TV production process. And while we're having that open house tomorrow, we'll have the raw footage from the Lloyd Bridges visit last week and a Polaroid camera so that anyone who wants a picture can get a picture of Lloyd Bridges or themselves in Lloyd Bridges or their friends in Lloyd Bridges. So what we decided to do was to organize a series of two-day workshops and seminars, and we invited people from other organizations to come together, come to Philadelphia for 2 days, and we showed them what we were doing. We talked about how it got started and some of the thoughts that we had behind it. And then as part of it, we also had a workshop where they would take these porta-packs and do segments based around the workshop and end up with a finished product that they would then have gone through and had the experience of putting together.
So we shared space with a company called Visual Information Systems that ran a hospital tape duplication network. And a drug company would go to various hospitals and say, would you like to join our network? And the hospitals would say, sure, what do we have to do? And they'd say, well, you have to have videotape playback equipment. Well, as a result, there were about 40 different types of videotape that this company had to deal with. And every night they would duplicate tapes in formats ranging from 2-inch quadruplex down to 1/4-inch Akai. And it was a nightmare. And in 1971, while I was at Computer Television, Sony brought in a product for us to look at, and it was the 3/4-inch U-matic video cassette machine. It was just astounding.
And I think our industry, our business probably would not exist had somebody not invented the 3/4 U-matic video cassette player.
Americans love to join associations, and industrial television gave birth to 2 tiny organizations.
The ITS, the National ITS, and the and NITA, which is the National Industrial Television Association, merged earlier this year to form one group, one common group, called the International Industrial Television Association. And the goals and objectives basically are to set up an international sharing of ideas, basically between people in management positions.
My first ITVA conference, we had 42 people pre-registered, probably about 55 total attendance. The one thing that I remember about it was the chance to sit down and talk to people who were doing the same thing I was struggling to do and share solutions to problems, common problems.
That's, I think, a lot of the success ITVA had early on was this sharing of information. If I had a problem, I'd call someone else I knew in the association and say, look, I'm trying to do this. Have you ever done that? How'd you do it?
The year was 1972, and I had to get on my knees practically and beg for $5,000 for a set which we could amortize over 10 programs, and trying to convince management that that $5,000 was going to be money well spent.
Plan what has to be done and how you want to do it. Prepare everything you'll need, and with everyone who has anything to do with the production. Then produce, but only after you're thoroughly satisfied that everything and everyone is ready to go when you roll the tape.
Stand by, America. It's time to play the Energy Game with your host, Ken Bolton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Everybody's playing it. Now you can play too. You control the action. You control the processing.
These types of settings are challenges to your imagination.
The biggest challenge that I faced as a female in a male-dominated industry was mostly establishing my credibility. When I would go on remote locations, I would have to convince people that I was the one in charge, that I was the producer-director, and basically establish myself as the leader on the shoot.
There are lots of times when you could have sold someone on the idea of using long distance.
And here are your hosts for today's show, Jane Van Bergen and Bob James.
Nat Stacker III, the big advantage is yours now because you have first crack at the incredible lightning round.
We actually had to create artwork, and we had to shoot everything on slides, and we had to transfer everything to videotape.
In the old days when we edited, we used reel-to-reel tape and we grease pencil marked our spot and we rolled back, and we hoped on the fly that we would catch that edit point.
Why, you may ask, did I buy these glasses? Well, it's rare that employees get a chance to have direct input into the marketing plans for one of the corporation's products, but American Polarizers would be very appreciative of some information right now.
I was one of the early people using a portable black and white camera. They made it possible for people to produce corporate programming that had never been possible before. We could get out of the studio, we could go places, we could show things, we could demonstrate processes, and they just were not really possible to do in real environments before. You could do some of it or talk about it in a studio, but this was a whole new ball game.
The first time I actually got into video was in '75. I was working with James Wong Howe. Since I was a big strapping young boy in those days, I was elected to be the bearer of that portable equipment, and it was about 100 pounds of equipment.
And NAB called me and they said, who is ITVA? And I said, ITVA is the group that invented and developed E&G. And I said that for the simple reason that at that time the broadcaster was just really getting into E&G. They'd been using film before that, 16 millimeter. And we were learning to shoot single camera and editing before the broadcaster was with videotape. And so, I know we call it EFP. We brought a lot to the industry that I think the people don't realize.
The consultants and architects demanded vast quantities of money and floor space. And without asking the chief or anyone else what kind of wonderful tapes they would make, or just who would see them, or what the tapes would be about, the consultants continued to consult. After all,
And by the time we got the studio built and equipped, then along came the portable cameras and the portable field production equipment, and we found we didn't need the studio.
Then from there, we graduated into electronic film production, and we've been able to make our programs more real, if you will, to our audience by being there in the location and enhancing the programs with a lot of wonderful computer graphics that are astounding in terms of sophistication and color compared to those old crude character generators we used for much of the 70s.
When I was starting, there was no such thing as editing a videotape. There were no time-based correctors, there was no video cassette, there was no distribution system. VCRs in homes and in offices were almost not heard of. There was no resource of freelance or independent talent to draw on.
Several years ago, wandering around an NAB floor, I decided to count to see how many standards there were for recording on film, recording on audio tape, recording on videotape, recording on disc, magnetic disc, and recording on optical disc. I stopped counting when I reached 75.
The biggest change I see for the immediate future of this industry is less of a dependence on technology. We throw on light switches and we don't have to think about the generators that are making the power and the distribution systems and who made the light bulb and so on. I see the same thing happening in video. We've been very technologically based. You couldn't be in this industry before unless you knew how to work a complex videotape recorder or how to set up a complex camera or something like that. Now that technology is really simple. We have little kids who can operate camcorders.
Other forces from outside the industry are also causing repercussions.
The most important development in private television in the last 10 years has nothing to do with technology or programming. It has to do with the corporate downsizing that has affected so many companies.
When you could buy equipment that you could take out on the field, go do remotes, go do location shoots, and not be captive to the studio, which we were in the early days, It then became a much broader kind of market. There was less of a need for a big monolithic corporate television facility, and the whole opportunity opened up to independents. So there aren't a lot of corporate facilities left. 1992.
In-house facilities were built to save money, and now we're using outside services for the very same reason.
Within my time span in the industry, we've seen the development of the cassette, electronic editing, time code related editing, nonlinear editing,
Rearrange
the camcorder, chip cameras, fiber optic distribution, satellite distribution. It's just amazing. Every change has had a tremendous impact on the industry.
We're still doing the same things that we did 20 years ago in terms of what we're trying to communicate. Communicating ideas, training people how to do things better.
The Internal Revenue Service is the largest agency of the Treasury Department. The mailroom of each district office is flooded with returns as the April 15th deadline approaches. Sacks are tossed on a growing pile to await opening and distribution.
Receipt and control personnel carefully count and accept the heavy cages of pre-sorted mail as they're unloaded from the truck. More than 40 million pieces of mail will cross our dock this year.
Hi, I'm Marcy Singer. Here in the Marketime computer room, all of you, all our prime prospects, are processed.
Through brokers, we distribute unique services to Fortune 1000 customers around the world. Sophisticated claims processing services.
Toro, America's great leader in the field of power mowing equipment, proudly presents the story of its dynamic growth and achievements. The dramatic story of an idea nurtured and developed by a small group of men many years ago.
Leading the riding mower line is this 832 rear-engine rider, rated #1 by a leading consumer rating magazine.
Now, let's use this demonstration model for a moment while we dial our number. Take up your receiver and always listen for the dial tone.
Meet your new partner. This will replace the telephone that many of us are used to. It can do everything your old phone could do, and a whole lot more.
It's not too dissimilar in walking on stilts.
Dr. Richard Coyne, SKNF's Director of Occupational Health, says his experience here supports the national publicity about problems with platform shoes. According to Dr. Coyne, the shoes, some of which have 2 or more inches of sole, have contributed to or caused 1/3 of the accidents reported to the dispensary over the last 2 months.
"20 years ago, corporate television was looked at almost as a novelty by a lot of management people. That is not the case today.
Our first brush report was done 20 years ago, and at that time we found that there were only 300 corporations in the United States using television for communications, marketing, and training purposes. There are over 12,000 companies using television on a regular basis.
Today, with the sophisticated digital effects units and with the character generators and paint boxes that we have, we can almost whip up anything instantaneously and put it out on a shelf within a matter of a couple hours.
I don't think any of us really looked ahead to think about what it would be like 25 years later and how pervasive it would be, not only through organizations and corporations, but throughout our whole society.
We've expanded the use of how we use the television medium.
Corporate television is still struggling for an identity. We're accepted in the corporate world, but not the way I think we should be.
There's an old joke, you can always tell the AV producer, he's the one who holds out for the lowest price.
The ability to just take material from any place that you have in a linear sequence of shots, assemble it on a computer screen, and have that be the final product, not have to go into a secondary videotape assembly stage. But I don't think that's as significant as the changes that are occurring in the democratization of the industry, from being television to being video. And video replacing things that people never dreamed of using video for before.
mean I can put together a whole video program?
Without ever having to leave your desk. This is the real thing, Fred. This is what your imagination's been waiting for.
My business now is optical disc, digital and analog disc. And as much as we would like to be all things to all people, the technology still doesn't do what tape does so effectively.
Most of us predicted that the videotape, especially the 3/4-inch videotape, would die a quiet death by, say, maybe the end of the 1970s, and we all know how that prediction went.
So the rapid rate at which we put it all in the desktop, I think, is very badly oversold. We can do a lot of things with graphics and text and stills, but motion video is a real challenge.
There was some rawness to the early programs that we're doing that communicated well. I mean, you see a lot of sort of attempts at it in some of the reality-based broadcast TV that we see today. But that does get your attention in some way. There's something about it that does. And I think some of the slickness, depending on what the purpose and the objective is, may not always be an advantage.
Back in 1962, a gentleman named Gordon Moore co-founded Intel Corporation. He said that every 2 to 3 years, the versatility and the speed of computing would double. At the same time, the cost and the size of computing would halve. You know, if that kind of a trend up and down had been applied to automobiles in 1960, a Mercedes-Benz, which then cost you, say, $10,000 and gave 10 miles to the gallon of gas, would today cost under $10, and it would give over 10,000 miles to a gallon of gas. So that's what's happened to the computing industry, and that's what's happening to television. Every piece of television equipment is a computer.
The old joke is, what do you spend most of your time doing in post-production suite? Watching tape machines wind. And that all goes away with disc. It's immediate.
So there will be no universal videotape format ever. So the future of recording is a universal format called the computer disk drive.
Scott Phillips is bringing that day closer with the first tapeless television program.
A Day in the Life of Melrose is more of a technology demonstration than anything else. It's shot directly into a computer, RGB into the computer. The computer does the A to D conversion, drops it direct to disk. It's edited entirely on the disk, from the disk, laid back to the disk, all within the computer environment, and then we take the computer over to KCET, wire it into the system, and uplink directly from the computer. So at no time does it touch or come from videotape. It's totally 100% computer-based environment.
We've got to think openly about desktop video and realize that it's the wave of the future. I mean, how exciting it is to say that I can access a database while I'm online, or to think as you're in an editing session that you want to go online and dial up a video library that happens to be in London because you need some London street scenes, and you dial it in online. I mean, we're not thinking like that right now. But that capability is virtually here today.
Videotape is dead. It will take us another 5 to 10 years maybe to bury it. Computer technology, laser technology, digital television, it all means that videotape is going to go away. We don't need linear anything anymore.
Will videotape as we know it be around in 15 years, 25 years, 100? Who cares? We as producers are always interested in the content and the form. The technology has always been secondary. So if it's digital disc, so be it.
Now you're going to have people like myself sitting in their houses kicking out content providers. It's not technology providers. You know, it's not huge production environments. Some upstart kid with fire in his loins gets hold of this stuff. We're all in for, you know, change of pace.
We've got a long way to go to start thinking in concept as far as communications instead of just the technology. I think we let technologies get in the way a lot.
I want information at my fingertips. I don't want to watch a video anymore in real time. I want to have access, random access, not linear access.
From here on out, the content provider is king. The person with a product, the person with a message, person with a song to sing, whatever. And instead of fix it in post, it's going to be make it in post from here on out.
Communication skills are the common thread. And it really doesn't matter in a lot of ways what technology or what medium you're applying them to.
What's going to be important in this industry is going to be talent and technique and people. And if you can tell a story properly using video,
I think corporate television is still an awakening giant.
No matter which road you take, it's the marriage of our hearts with technology that gives birth to the force of our imagination.
Ba-da-bum-bum,